A deep blue diamond glitters under a museum's protective glass. Its beauty is legendary, but its history is written in tragedy. This is the Hope Diamond, and for centuries, a shadow has followed its every move. Wealthy owners met with ruin, empires crumbled, and a chilling story of a curse took root in our collective imagination. But how much of that dark legend is true, and how much is a fabrication spun from coincidence and fear? Today, we are launching a historical investigation to separate the documented facts from the sensational fiction. You will walk away with a definitive understanding of this gem's incredible journey, from ancient Indian mines to the heart of the Smithsonian. We will trace its path through royal courts and private collections, examining the real misfortunes that befell its owners and asking whether a stone can truly hold malice. Did a French king's obsession seal his dynasty's fate? Could a jeweler's clever sales pitch create an enduring myth? By the end, you will have the tools to decide for yourself where the line between cursed object and cursed story truly lies. What is it about a beautiful object that makes us so ready to believe it can bring ruin? Our story begins not in a palace, but in the dust and heat of the Golconda mines of southern India. In the 1660s, a French gem merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, a man who had spent decades traversing continents in search of rare stones, acquired something extraordinary. It was a large, uncut diamond with a distinct steely blue color. The exact details of the transaction are lost, but the legends that would later attach themselves to this moment are vivid. One persistent tale claims the stone was not merely mined but stolen. It was said to have been pried from the eye, or perhaps the forehead, of a sacred statue of the Hindu goddess Sita. To take such an object was not just theft, it was a profound sacrilege, an act guaranteed to invoke the wrath of the deity it was meant to honor. This story of divine punishment would become the foundational layer of the curse, providing it with an ancient and spiritual origin. Tavernier, according to the legend, became its first victim. The popular account of his demise is gruesome and symbolic. He is said to have been torn apart by wild dogs, a fate often interpreted as a form of divine retribution. But here, our investigation must pause. Historians have long debated the accuracy of this dramatic end. While Tavernier did die under somewhat mysterious circumstances shortly after selling the diamond, the wild dog story is likely a later embellishment, a piece of folklore that perfectly fit the growing narrative of a vengeful gem. So, from its very first appearance in the historical record, the blue diamond is already wrapped in a mixture of verifiable fact and potent myth. Tavernier sold the stone and faded from history, but the diamond was just beginning its long, glittering, and ominous journey. Tavernier's rough blue stone found its way into the hands of a man who understood power and spectacle perhaps better than anyone in Europe, King Louis XIV of France. The Sun King, as he was known, was the absolute monarch of a glittering court, and he saw in this unique gem a perfect symbol of his reign. In 1668, he purchased the diamond from Tavernier for a substantial sum and entrusted his court jeweler to perform a transformation. The rough crystal was expertly recut into a stunning, symmetrical stone of 67 carats, a gem that would forever be known as the French blue. It was a masterpiece of precision, designed to catch the light of 1,000 candles in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. Louis had it set as a centerpiece of his ceremonial insignia, a piece of royal regalia worn during state occasions. For decades, the French blue was a fixture of unimaginable opulence, a cold, blue eye watching over the dances, intrigues, and absolute power of the Bourbon court. It is here, in this palace of ambition, that the whispers of a curse began to find their first historical foothold. The legend would later eagerly connect the diamond to a series of personal and national tragedies. One of the first figures often cited is the king's famous mistress, Madame de Montespan. For years, she was the undisputed queen of Versailles in all but name, enjoying immense influence and the king's deepest affection. Yet her reign ended in a dramatic and humiliating fall from grace, entangled in a dark scandal known as the Affair of the Poisons. While her downfall was the result of complex court politics and her own alleged involvement in sinister plots, the story of the curse neatly places the French blue at the scene. The narrative suggests that the gem's malign influence had begun its work, targeting those closest to the king who wore it. This connection is, of course, a retrospective link, but it is a powerful one. It takes a documented historical misfortune, the fall of a royal favorite, and offers a tantalizing, supernatural explanation. The stone was no longer just a beautiful object, it was becoming an actor in history, a silent carrier of doom through the gilded halls of France. And the kingdom's fate was about to take a far darker turn. The opulence of Versailles could not last forever. By the late 1700s, the very foundations of the French monarchy were cracking under the weight of inequality and unrest. The French blue, that brilliant symbol of absolute royal power, was about to become a target of the revolution's fury. In September 1792, Paris was in turmoil. The monarchy had been suspended and the royal family was imprisoned. In this atmosphere of chaos, the garde meuble, the royal treasury housing the crown jewels, was left shockingly vulnerable. For several nights in a row, a band of thieves brazenly broke into the building, systematically looting its priceless contents. The French blue was among the treasures that vanished without a trace. The heist itself was almost farcical in its ease, suggesting inside knowledge or a stunning level of bureaucratic neglect. Who were these thieves? Theories abound. Some point to a group of common criminals who simply saw an opportunity in the political disarray. Others suggest a more organized plot, possibly involving royalists seeking to preserve the crown's wealth or even foreign agents. The truth was buried in the revolutionary chaos. What is certain is that the diamond, after over a century as a fixed star in the French firmament, simply disappeared. Its physical trail went cold. This disappearance proved to be fertile ground for the curse narrative. To a superstitious public living through the terrifying violence of the Reign of Terror, the connection seemed obvious. The diamond that had adorned their absolute kings was gone, and so too was the old world. King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, who had inherited the gem's legacy, met their fate at the guillotine. The curse, in the public imagination, had not just stolen a jewel, it had executed a king and toppled a dynasty. The stone's vanishing act made it more powerful as a story than it ever was as an object, its supposed malice now floating freely over a nation in bloodshed, waiting for its next chapter to begin. For 20 years, the French blue was simply gone, a ghost of the old regime. Then, in 1812, a deep blue diamond of remarkable size and color surfaced in London. It was in the possession of a diamond merchant named Daniel Eliasson. This was no ordinary gem. Its steely blue hue was incredibly rare, and its weight, 45.52 carats, was substantial. But most telling of all was its cut, a modified cushion brilliant shape that gemologists now believe could have been expertly fashioned from the larger, symmetrical French blue. The timing was also highly suggestive. 1812 was precisely 2 decades after the theft from the garde meuble, a period long enough for the heat of the revolution to have cooled and for a stolen national treasure to be discreetly recut to disguise its origins. The evidence, while circumstantial, paints a compelling picture. The French blue had not been lost, it had been transformed. Its recutting was an act of necessity, a way to erase its identifiable royal past and create a new, sellable asset. In London, it found its first documented private owner, a wealthy banker and gem collector named Henry Philip Hope. It was from this man that the diamond finally received the name it carries today, the Hope Diamond. Henry Philip Hope acquired the stone, and it became the crown jewel of his extensive collection, catalogued meticulously among his possessions. For a time, it seemed the diamond had found a peaceful home. Yet, the Hope family's story would later be woven into the curse's tapestry. After Henry Philip's death, the diamond passed through his heirs, and the once vast Hope fortune gradually dissipated through generations, culminating in the eventual sale of the gem to pay debts. To those who believed in the curse, this was not simple financial misfortune, it was a pattern. The Hope family's ruin became the next chapter in the stone's dark biography, proving that its malice could cross the English Channel and patiently wait for its price to be paid. Henry Philip Hope himself, however, died peacefully in his bed at an advanced age, his vast fortune and his famous blue diamond seemingly intact. He was a lifelong bachelor, and upon his death in 1839, his immense estate, including his legendary gem collection, did not pass to a single heir. Instead, it became entangled in a complex legal web divided among his three nephews. The diamond itself went to his eldest nephew, also named Henry Hope. This division was the first subtle crack in the family's financial foundation. The younger Henry Hope did enjoy the diamond for a time, even having it displayed at the Great Exhibition of 1851 in London, where the public marveled at its uncommon beauty. But when he died without children, the stone passed again, this time to his nephew Lord Francis Hope. This is where the family's story takes a decisive turn toward the narrative the curse would later exploit. Lord Francis Hope was a man of extravagant tastes and by many accounts poor financial judgment. He inherited the diamond but not the business acumen that had built the family fortune. He faced mounting debts from a lavish lifestyle and a series of bad investments. Compounding his troubles was his marriage to an American actress, May Yo. Their relationship was turbulent and expensive, a constant source of scandal and financial drain in the newspapers of the day. By the turn of the century, Lord Francis was bankrupt. In a desperate move to settle his creditors, he was forced to sell the family's most famous possession. In 1901, the Hope diamond was put up for auction. It was a profound and public humiliation, the final symbol of a great banking dynasty's collapse. So was this the curse in action? A closer look reveals a more human story. The Hope family's downfall was not a sudden, mysterious plague, but a slow unraveling across generations. The initial division of the estate diluted wealth. Later heirs, like Lord Francis, lacked the financial discipline of their ancestor and were swept up by the changing tides of the British aristocracy's economic decline. His personal misfortunes in love and finance were his own making. The diamond was merely a passive asset, one of the last to be sold when the money ran out. Yet its sale provided the perfect plot point for the growing legend. A priceless gem that brings ruin to a wealthy family is a timeless tale, far more compelling than a story of generational wealth mismanagement. The stone's next chapter, however, would see its curse narrative actively manufactured, not just inferred from misfortune. The sale of the Hope diamond in 1901 did not quiet its legend, it amplified it. As the gem passed through a rapid succession of hands in the early 20th century, a pattern of alleged tragedies emerged, each story more chilling than the last, solidifying the curse in the public mind. The first figure in this dark parade was a French diamond dealer named Jacques Collot. He purchased the stone, presumably to sell it at a profit, but the story goes that his possession of it unhinged his mind. According to popular accounts, Collot succumbed to insanity and ultimately took his own life. It is a stark and tragic tale, perfectly tailored for the curse narrative. Yet, when historians dig into the records, the facts become frustratingly vague. While Collot did die, the specifics of his demise and his mental state are poorly documented, leaving room for dramatic embellishment. The story of his madness and suicide may be more folklore than verified biography, but it served as a crucial brick in the wall of the curse. Next came Prince Ivan Kanatov, a name often cited in the diamond's grim biography. The tale is that this Russian nobleman purchased the Hope diamond, only to meet a violent end shortly afterward, murdered during the political upheavals of the Russian Revolution. It is a compelling link connecting the gem to yet another fallen dynasty. However, the historical record for Prince Ivan Kanatov is so murky that many researchers now question whether he ever existed at all. He may be a composite figure, a ghostly aristocrat conjured by storytellers to fill a necessary role in the saga. His alleged murder is less a documented event and more a thematic echo of the French royal tragedy, reinforcing the idea that the diamond carried a revolutionary poison within its blue depths. Then there is the story of Simon Mountcharides, a Greek merchant who supposedly bought the Hope in the 19-teens. His alleged fate is particularly cinematic. The story claims that shortly after acquiring the diamond, Mountcharides drove his car off a cliff, killing himself, his wife, and his child. It is a horrifying image of sudden, total ruin, a family obliterated by the stone's influence. But again, the verifiable details are scant. While a man named Simon Mountcharides may have owned the diamond, the dramatic account of the car crash is difficult to corroborate with contemporary news reports or official records. It exists primarily within the oral tradition of the curse itself. What is fascinating about this trail of tragedy is not necessarily its historical truth, but its narrative function. Each story, whether based on a kernel of fact or pure invention, served a purpose. They transformed the Hope diamond from a mere valuable object into a character with a consistent motive. Jacques Collot's madness showed it could attack the mind. Prince Kanatov's murder showed it could attract violence. Simon Mountcharides' crash showed it could strike with brutal, random finality. These tales were collected, repeated, and published in newspapers and magazines, cementing the curse in popular lore. They created a template of expectation, a lens through which any future owner's misfortune would be viewed. The diamond was no longer just carrying a history, it was actively writing a horror story, one victim at a time, and the next owner would be the man who understood the power of a story better than anyone. The trail of misfortune now led to the very pinnacle of an empire. In 1908, the Hope diamond appeared in the treasury of the Ottoman Sultan, Abdul Hamid II. Known as the Red Sultan for his harsh rule, he was an absolute monarch presiding over a vast, ancient, and fractious empire in its twilight years. He acquired the blue gem, most likely through a French dealer, adding it to his legendary collection of jewels. For a man who lived in constant fear of assassination and rebellion, surrounded by opulence in his isolated palace, the diamond must have seemed like just another trophy of power, a cold, beautiful object to be locked away and admired. His ownership, however, was astonishingly brief. A mere year later, in April 1909, the empire he struggled to control finally erupted. The Young Turk Revolution, a movement of modernizing military officers and intellectuals, stripped him of his power. Abdul Hamid was deposed, placed under house arrest, and exiled. The centuries-old Ottoman Sultanate was effectively finished. In the chaotic aftermath, as the Sultan's world collapsed, the Hope diamond vanished from his possession. It is believed one of his aides, perhaps fearing the revolutionaries or simply seizing an opportunity, smuggled the stone out of the country and sold it in Paris to settle debts or fund a new life. The sequence of events is irresistibly symbolic. A sultan obsessed with controlling a dying empire acquires a legendary gem, and within a year he loses both the stone and his throne. His empire would crumble entirely within a decade. So, do we see the curse of the Hope diamond playing out on a geopolitical scale, or is this simply the relentless tide of history? Abdul Hamid's downfall was not a mysterious, isolated event. The Ottoman Empire had been weakening for a century, dubbed the sick man of Europe by its rivals. Nationalist movements tore at its borders, economic stagnation crippled its treasury, and the Sultan's own autocratic and paranoid policies alienated the military and the educated elite. The Young Turk Revolution was the inevitable explosion of these pent-up pressures. The diamond did not cause the collapse, it was merely a glittering passenger on a sinking ship. Yet, its presence in the Sultan's vault at that precise moment allowed the curse narrative to expand its scope dramatically. It was no longer just about bankrupting merchants or driving men mad. It could now topple emperors and erase dynasties. The story had found its perfect historical backdrop, where a real, world-altering tragedy provided all the proof the legend would ever need. While the diamond's journey seemed woven from genuine tragedy, its next chapter would be crafted with deliberate, theatrical flair. The gem resurfaced in Paris, and in 1910 it was purchased by a man who saw not a cursed object but an unparalleled opportunity. That man was Pierre Cartier of the legendary Cartier jewelry dynasty. He was not just a merchant, he was a storyteller and a psychologist of desire, understanding that for the ultra-wealthy, rarity was not enough. They craved narrative, drama, a piece of history they could own and display. In the Hope diamond, Cartier found his perfect protagonist. He acquired the stone and immediately set his sights on a specific buyer, the fabulously wealthy American heiress Evalyn Walsh McLean. She was a force of nature, known for her extravagant tastes, her love of the spotlight, and a superstitious streak that Cartier expertly diagnosed. He did not simply offer her a jewel, he staged an experience. In a private presentation, Cartier wove a tale. He presented the diamond not with dry provenance documents, but with a sensationalized dossier, a collection of the most chilling stories attached to its past. He recounted the grisly fate of Tavernier, the bloody fall of the French monarchy, the madness of Jacques Collot, and the ruin of the Hope family. Every tragedy was emphasized, every mysterious death highlighted. He presented the stone as a living, breathing character with a dark and thrilling biography. For Evalyn McLean, a woman who collected both gems and experiences, this was irresistible. She was not deterred by the curse, she was enchanted by it. She saw ownership as a challenge, a way to prove her own strength and fortune could defy the gem's dark history. Cartier, the master marketer, had transformed a potential liability, the stories of misfortune, into the diamond's greatest selling point. He wasn't selling a blue diamond, he was selling a piece of Gothic romance, a conversation starter unlike any other. This transaction was a pivotal moment in the history of the Hope diamond curse. Before Cartier, the stories were scattered folklore, whispered tales that grew in the retelling. After Cartier, they were packaged, polished, and presented as an official, thrilling provenance. He gave the curse a commercial seal of approval, cementing its details in the public imagination and permanently shaping the diamond's identity as an object of beautiful danger. The curse was no longer just a legend, it was a branded feature. Evalyn McLean got exactly what she wanted from Pierre Cartier, a story she could wear. She purchased the Hope diamond in 1911, and from that moment she made it a central character in her own spectacular and ultimately tragic life. She was a Washington, D.C. socialite of immense wealth, the daughter of a gold miner who struck it rich, and she lived with a theatrical flair that captivated the nation. She wore the legendary blue diamond not in secret but with defiant pride. She had it reset into a lavish necklace surrounded by white diamonds, and she wore it to parties, to the opera, even walking her dog around the city. For Evalyn, the curse was not a warning, it was a dare. She famously declared that she would wear it as a good luck charm, believing that her own vibrant spirit and fortune could overpower its dark legacy. She even let her Great Dane wear it on his collar for a photograph. Her ownership was a public spectacle, a performance of immunity against the whispers of doom. Yet, as the years unfolded, her life began to mirror the very tragedies Cartier had so vividly described. The first profound blow came in 1919, when her 9-year-old son, Vincent, ran into the street and was struck and killed by a car. The loss was devastating, a private grief that no public fortune could soften. Then her daughter, also named Evalyn, struggled for years with addiction and depression, eventually dying from a drug overdose in 1946. Her marriage to newspaper heir Ned McLean was a public disaster, riddled with his infidelity, alcoholism, and erratic behavior that culminated in his being declared legally insane and committed to a mental institution where he died. Finally, the vast McLean fortune, once seemingly inexhaustible, evaporated through mismanagement and the Great Depression, leaving Evalyn bankrupt at her death in 1947. The Hope Diamond was one of the few assets left, seized to pay her debts. So was Evalyn Walsh McLean the curse's most compelling and tragic proof. The sheer concentration of misfortune is staggering, a catalogue of loss that feels almost theatrical in its cruelty. It is easy to see why her story became the cornerstone of the diamond's dark legend. But a closer historical look reveals a more complex portrait. Her son's death was a terrible accident, the kind of random tragedy that strikes families regardless of wealth or superstition. Her daughter's struggle with mental health and addiction was a private battle against illnesses that were poorly understood at the time. Her husband's instability and their financial ruin were, like the Hope family's downfall, the result of personal choices and economic forces far larger than any gem. Evalyn lived a life of extreme highs and lows, and she made the diamond a symbol of both. She invited the narrative in, and when misfortune came, as it does to all lives in some form, the story was there waiting to provide a reason. Her biography does not prove a curse, it demonstrates how human suffering, when viewed through the lens of a powerful legend, can be reinterpreted as supernatural fate. The diamond did not cause her pain, but it gave her pain a famous, glittering focal point. The blue diamond gleamed around Evalyn McLean's neck, a constant companion through a life that veered between dazzling spectacle and profound sorrow. Her son Vincent's death in 1919 was not just a private grief, it was a public shock. The 9-year-old boy darted into a Washington, D.C. street and was struck by a car. The accident was instantaneous and fatal, a random, devastating event that left no room for reason or blame. For a mother who believed she could charm fate itself, this loss was a shattering blow from which she never fully recovered. The curse narrative eagerly claimed this tragedy as its own, a clear sign the diamond's malice could reach even an innocent child. Yet, statistically, such accidents, while heartbreaking, were not uncommon in an era before modern traffic safety. The legend, however, provided a singular, sinister cause where none existed, offering a dark explanation for the unexplainable pain of a grieving parent. Her daughter's life unfolded as another long shadow. The younger Evalyn, known as Evalyn Jr., grew up in the glare of her mother's fame and the weight of the family's notoriety. From a young age, she battled severe depression and addiction, seeking escape in alcohol and narcotics. Her struggles were a private war fought in the public eye, with her mother often using her wealth and influence to secure treatments or manage scandals. She married and divorced, her life a series of crises that culminated in her death from a drug overdose in 1946 at the age of 25. Here again, the curse seemed to have a perfect victim, a life cut short by self-destruction. But modern understanding frames her story differently. She was a woman grappling with mental illness in a time when such conditions were stigmatized and poorly treated. Her pain exacerbated by the immense pressure of being a McLean, of living under the microscope of wealth and a famous family curse. The diamond did not introduce addiction or depression into her life, but it provided a mythic backdrop against which her very real human suffering was dramatized. Then there was Ned McLean, Evalyn's husband. His decline was a very public unraveling. He inherited the Washington Post newspaper and a vast fortune, but he possessed little of the discipline required to steward either. His life became a cascade of scandal, infidelity, and reckless financial decisions. He was famously involved in the Teapot Dome corruption scandal that rocked the Harding administration, and his management of the post was so disastrous that his own family had him removed from control. His behavior grew increasingly erratic, marked by paranoia and alcoholism, until he was legally declared insane and committed to a psychiatric institution where he died in 1941. The loss of the Washington Post was not a mysterious theft. It was the direct result of Ned's incompetence and the family's intervention to save the paper from ruin. So, were these separate tragedies the work of a cursed gem, or the symptoms of deeper, more human ailments? The psychological and social factors at play are impossible to ignore. This was a family operating under the immense, distorting pressure of nearly limitless wealth and relentless public scrutiny. They lived without boundaries, where every mistake was magnified and every personal failing became front-page news. Ned McLean's instability, his son's tragic accident, his daughter's addiction, and the eventual financial collapse were not orchestrated by a blue stone. They were the potential outcomes of a life lived at an extreme where normal safeguards and consequences seemed suspended. The diamond, in this light, functioned as a brilliant scapegoat. It was a tangible, external cause onto which the family and the public could project their need for an explanation. It was easier to blame a centuries-old curse than to confront the complex, uncomfortable realities of mental illness, parental grief, the corrupting influence of unchecked fortune, and the simple, cruel randomness of fate. The Hope Diamond did not create their problems, but it gave a shape and a story to their pain, a narrative so powerful it threatened to eclipse the real people who lived and suffered within it. Evalyn McLean's final years were a quiet echo of her former brilliance, shadowed by debt and loss. When she passed away in 1947, the legendary Hope Diamond was no longer a symbol of defiant glamour, but an asset listed among her remaining possessions to be sold. The task of handling her extraordinary jewelry collection fell to one of the few men in the world equipped for it, the New York jeweler Harry Winston. Known as the King of Diamonds, Winston had built his reputation on acquiring and transforming the world's most famous gems. He purchased the entirety of McLean's collection, and the deep blue diamond with all its heavy history now belonged to him. For a decade, the stone rested in his vault, a prize among prizes. But Harry Winston was not a man who believed in curses. He was a scientist of light and structure, a man who saw in diamonds not omens but marvels of geology and artistry. He viewed the Hope not as a carrier of doom but as a piece of natural history, a masterpiece that belonged not in a private safe but before the eyes of the world. This perspective led to a decision that would forever change the diamond story. In 1958, Winston made a monumental donation. He would send the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. His goal was to create a national gem collection that would inspire and educate the public. The method of delivery, however, would become almost as famous as the gem itself. In an act of stunning nonchalance, Winston placed the insured multi-million-dollar diamond into a plain cardboard box, wrapped it in plain brown paper, and sent it to the Smithsonian via registered mail. The postage cost him a mere $145. It arrived without fanfare or security detail, a priceless treasure arriving like a book order. This simple brown wrapper marked a profound transition. The Hope Diamond was no longer a private trophy, a gambler's challenge, or a cursed heirloom. It was now a public specimen, a piece of cultural heritage, and in that moment, according to popular belief, the curse was broken. The logic of the legend held that the diamond's malice was fueled by private greed and personal possession. By giving it to the people for the purpose of study and wonder, Harry Winston had supposedly neutralized its power. No private owner would ever suffer from its touch again. Of course, Harry Winston himself lived a long, prosperous, and uneventful life after the donation, a fact often cited as the curse's final proof of defeat. The stone was now where it truly belonged, under glass, its beauty available to all, and its dark stories safely confined to the labels beside it. Harry Winston's act of sending the diamond through the mail was a masterstroke of symbolism. In one simple, almost mundane gesture, he stripped the gem of its aura of dangerous exclusivity. Here was a man who handled the world's most precious stones every single day, a man whose entire life was built around their beauty and value, and he treated the most infamous of them all with a startling casualness. This was not the reverence of a king or the fearful obsession of a collector. This was the practical confidence of a scientist sending a specimen to a lab. And in doing so, he fundamentally changed the diamond's relationship with the world. The curse, as a story, requires a certain context to thrive. It needs a private owner, a single individual or family who possesses the stone as a symbol of personal status and wealth. It feeds on the tension between that private desire and the public legend of doom. The narrative gains its power from the secret fear in the owner's heart and the public's fascination with watching that fear potentially become reality. Harry Winston removed that context entirely. By donating the Hope diamond to the Smithsonian Institution, he transformed it from a private totem into a public artifact. It was no longer Evalyn McLean's daring accessory or a sultan's hidden treasure. It was now a case number, a mineralogical exhibit, a piece of history that belonged to everyone and no one at the same time. The stone was placed behind thick glass, lit for optimal viewing, with a placard detailing its chemical composition, its physical journey, and yes, the stories of the curse. But those stories were now framed as folklore, as part of the cultural mythology surrounding the object, not as an active, living threat. The public could marvel at its color, gasp at its size, and enjoy the shiver of the dark tales, all from the safe distance of a museum visitor. There was no longer a single person upon whom the curse could focus its supposed energy. And what of Harry Winston himself, the man who had physically possessed the diamond, who had held it in his hand and decided its fate? His life after the donation is often presented as the final, definitive argument against the curse. He lived for decades more, building his company into a global empire, renowned for his philanthropy and his contributions to gemology. He passed away peacefully in 1978 at the age of 82. No sudden ruin, no mysterious illness, no tragic accident befell him or his business. In fact, the association with the Hope diamond only burnished the Winston brand, adding a layer of legendary history to its reputation. So did he break the curse. From the perspective of narrative logic, he certainly dismantled its engine. The curse story relies on a cycle of private acquisition and personal catastrophe. Winston interrupted that cycle permanently. He took the gem out of the realm of personal vanity and placed it into the realm of public education. The curse, a tale that thrived in the shadows of private ownership, seemed to evaporate in the bright, fluorescent lights of a museum gallery. Its power was always the power of belief, and by changing how and why the diamond was held, Winston changed what people could believe about it. The stone could no longer be an active agent of misfortune because there was no longer a sole target for its malice. The curse didn't end with a magical incantation. It ended with a change of address from a private vault to a public institution. And in that transition, the most enduring mystery of the Hope diamond was perhaps solved not by proving the curse false, but by making its premise irrelevant. The brown paper package arrived at the Smithsonian, a quiet end to a thunderous history. Inside was not a curse but a specimen. For the curators and geologists at the National Museum of Natural History, this was not a moment for superstition, it was a moment for science. Their first task was to simply verify what they had received. They carefully unwrapped the parcel, and there it lay, the legendary Hope diamond, now an accession number in their log. Initial examinations were meticulous but straightforward, documenting its exact weight, 45.52 carats, its precise dimensions, and the intricate details of its platinum and diamond necklace setting. They photographed it from every angle, creating a permanent visual record. This was the essential, unglamorous work of a museum, transforming a myth into a measurable object. But these first steps were just the prelude. The real revelation would come years later, when technology caught up to the legend, and scientists could finally ask the diamond its deepest secrets. They would subject it to tools its previous owners could never have imagined: spectrometers and ultraviolet lamps, probing beyond its beautiful surface to understand its very soul. This marked a decisive shift in the diamond story, the point where folklore met hard data, and the gem began to reveal truths far more fascinating than any curse. The key to the Hope Diamond's mystery was not in a stolen idol's eye, but in its atomic structure. Advanced analysis classified it definitively as a Type 2b diamond. Now, that sounds technical, but it translates to something beautifully simple. Most diamonds are made of pure carbon, but the Hope contains trace amounts of the element boron within its crystal lattice. It is these boron atoms, scattered through the stone in just the right concentration, that are the true architects of its famous color. Boron absorbs yellow light, and by removing that yellow from the spectrum of white light passing through the stone, what remains and reaches our eyes is that profound, saturated blue. This scientific explanation demystified its most iconic feature. Its color was not a mark of divine wrath or royal ambition. It was a geological accident, a quirk of chemistry that occurred under immense pressure and heat deep within the Earth billions of years ago. But the science had one more spectacular surprise in store, a property that seemed almost magical. When scientists exposed the Hope diamond to ultraviolet light in a dark room and then turned the lights off, the gem did not simply go dark. It glowed. A strong, eerie red phosphorescence pulsed from its heart for several minutes before fading away. This ghostly afterglow, a phenomenon caused by the way those same boron impurities interact with energy, is exceptionally rare in diamonds. Think of it as the stone holding onto light and then slowly releasing it as a different color, a secret fire only visible in the dark. This radiant red glow, witnessed by few outside the lab, feels like the diamond's true hidden power, not one of malice, but of a stunning, natural beauty that operates on a level beyond human sight. The curse spoke of a stolen sacred light, but science revealed a stone that literally creates its own. That ghostly red glow is more than just a parlor trick. It is the direct result of the very same atomic quirk that paints the stone blue. To understand it, we need to look inside the diamond's crystal structure. Imagine a perfect three-dimensional grid, like a vast jungle gym made of carbon atoms, each one linked tightly to its neighbors. This is what gives a diamond its legendary hardness. But in the Hope diamond, something is different. Scattered throughout that perfect carbon grid, like uninvited guests at a formal party, are atoms of the element boron. These boron atoms are slightly different in size and behavior from the carbon atoms they replace. When light energy, like ultraviolet rays, hits the diamond, it excites these boron atoms. They absorb the energy and then, slowly, release it back out. But the energy they release is at a lower level, which our eyes perceive as that mesmerizing red phosphorescence. It is the stone literally cooling down from the energy bath, glowing with the evidence of its unique atomic fingerprint. This property makes the Hope diamond far more than a pretty gem. Because boron introduces what scientists call a hole in the crystal's electrical structure, the Hope is actually a natural semiconductor. In simple terms, it can conduct electricity under certain conditions, a trait it shares with the materials in your smartphone or computer chip. So, this ancient piece of compressed carbon is on an atomic level a distant cousin to modern technology. Its beauty is a side effect of its bizarre and rare chemistry. For centuries, owners saw a cursed jewel, but science reveals a tiny piece of the natural world that behaves in extraordinary ways, a stone that holds light and can, in a sense, remember it. This atomic signature became the key to solving one of the diamond's oldest historical puzzles. Could science prove that this blue stone in Washington was truly the same one Tavernier brought from India so long ago? The answer lay in comparing atomic fingerprints. In the early 2000s, researchers at the Smithsonian and other institutions used a technique called spectroscopic analysis. Think of it as giving the diamond a very detailed medical scan that reads its chemical composition at a level deeper than color or clarity. They were looking for specific trace elements, the geological impurities that act like a birth certificate for a diamond, pointing to the specific conditions of the Earth's mantle where it formed. The analysis showed a very clear profile. The Hope diamond's pattern of nitrogen and boron impurities matched those of other known Golconda diamonds. Golconda stones have a specific, very pure crystal structure and a particular suite of trace elements that distinguish them from diamonds found in other parts of the world. This was the scientific smoking gun. The atomic data from the Hope aligned perfectly with the historic records, placing Tavernier's original purchase in the Golconda region of India. Science could now confidently draw a continuous line from the rough stone pulled from the earth centuries ago, to the recut French blue in Louis XIV's court, to the Hope diamond glowing under museum lights. The provenance was no longer just a chain of old stories and sales receipts. It was etched into the gem's very atoms. The legend spoke of a curse that connected its victims across time, but the reality is a physical connection, a geological thread that ties this one object irrevocably to a single ancient point on the map. The mystery of its origin was solved not by a historian's document, but by the silent testimony of boron atoms trapped in a crystal lattice for over 1 billion years. So if the science tells us the diamond's true nature, what does the history tell us about its supposed malice? To dismantle the curse, we must walk back through its story with a historian's eye, separating verified events from the embellishments that time has layered upon them. Let's start at the very beginning with Jean-Baptiste Tavernier. The legend claims a grisly end, torn apart by wild dogs as punishment for stealing a sacred stone. The historical record, however, paints a different picture. Tavernier sold the diamond to King Louis XIV in 1668 and returned to his travels. He lived for another 2 decades, finally passing away in Moscow in 1689 at the ripe old age of 84. While the exact cause of his death is not definitively recorded, there is no contemporary account of a violent animal attack. He died a wealthy man, having completed 6 epic voyages to the east. Far from being the curse's first victim, his life was one of extraordinary success and longevity. Moving forward, we must examine the diamond's time in the French court. The curse narrative eagerly links the gem to the downfall of Madame de Montespan and the entire Bourbon monarchy. Yet for over a century, the French blue resided peacefully in the royal treasury. It was worn by Louis XIV, who ruled for 72 years, one of the longest reigns in European history, and died of natural causes at 76. It was inherited by Louis XV, who also died of smallpox after a long reign. The diamond was simply part of the crown's regalia, an inert symbol. To blame it for the French Revolution is to ignore the colossal economic, social, and political forces that had been building for generations. The revolution was not caused by a jewel, it was caused by famine, debt, inequality, and Enlightenment ideas. The theft of the French blue during the chaos was a symptom of the collapse, not its catalyst. The diamond was stolen because the monarchy fell. The monarchy did not fall because the diamond was stolen. This is a crucial distinction that the curse narrative conveniently reverses. What about the string of unfortunate owners in the early 20th century? Here, the historian's tool is source criticism. The stories of Jacques Collot's suicide, Prince Kanatov's murder, and Simon Mountcharides' fatal car crash are sensational, but they are poorly documented. They appear primarily in newspaper gossip columns and retellings of the curse itself, not in official records, obituaries, or reliable biographies. In the case of Prince Kanatov, many scholars now believe he may never have existed, a phantom aristocrat invented to fill a dramatic role. These tales function as narrative glue, connecting the diamond's known sales to create an unbroken chain of doom. They are not historical facts, they are folklore, repeated and amplified because they make for a thrilling story. Even the tragic tale of the McLean family, while undeniably real in its grief, demonstrates a classic psychological pattern. When we believe in a curse, we engage in confirmation bias. We notice and remember every piece of misfortune that fits the pattern, while overlooking all the normal, peaceful days or the complex human reasons behind each tragedy. We connect dots that were never meant to be connected. Evalyn McLean lived a life of extreme volatility, and her personal sufferings, from her son's accident to her husband's mental illness, were profound human experiences. To attribute them to a gem is to overlook the realities of parenting, marriage, mental health, and financial management under the glare of immense wealth. The curse provides a simple, supernatural cause for deeply complex human pain. Ultimately, the Hope Diamond's legend is a masterclass in retrospective storytelling. Once the idea of a curse was planted, primarily by Pierre Cartier's clever sales pitch, people began reinterpreting the past through that lens. A long, successful life like Tavernier's was ignored, while a vague or tragic end was highlighted and dramatized. Coincidence was transformed into causation. The diamond became a character, and history was rewritten as its biography. The stone did not curse its owners. We cursed the stone with our own need for narrative, for a reason behind the randomness of fate. It is a story we tell to make sense of loss, to add a shadow of meaning to tragedy, and to believe that beautiful objects must have a price. But the price was never supernatural, it was always human, written in the choices we make and the histories we choose to remember. Our need for the curse runs deeper than simple superstition. It taps into fundamental quirks of the human mind, starting with a tendency called apophenia. This is the instinct to find meaningful patterns or connections in random, unrelated data. It is why we see faces in clouds or suspect a conspiracy when two unlikely events happen in sequence. With the Hope Diamond, apophenia is on full display. A king acquires a diamond and later falls from power. A family owns a gem and later faces bankruptcy. Our brains, wired for storytelling and cause and effect, instinctively link these events. We overlook the decades of peaceful ownership, the complex political revolutions, or the simple bad financial decisions. We connect the dots of misfortune and draw a line straight through the blue stone at the center. It feels true because it creates order from chaos, providing a single, elegant explanation for life's painful randomness. The curse offers a villain, a tangible reason for suffering that is easier to accept than the unsettling truth that sometimes terrible things just happen. This pattern seeking is supercharged by the power of narrative. A story about a beautiful object that brings ruin is irresistibly compelling. It combines awe with dread, desire with fear. Think of the classic fairy tale warning, the forbidden fruit, the treasure that costs everything. The Hope Diamond fits this archetype perfectly. Its breathtaking beauty makes the accompanying tragedy feel more profound, more ironic, and therefore more memorable. We are not captivated by a story of an ugly rock causing problems. We are mesmerized by the fall of something glorious. This narrative has a strong moralistic undercurrent, serving as a cautionary tale. It whispers that immense beauty and wealth come with a hidden price, that greed and vanity will be punished, and that tampering with sacred or ancient things invites retribution. The story of the diamond being stolen from a Hindu idol perfectly sets this moral stage. It frames every subsequent tragedy not as bad luck, but as poetic justice, a divine balance being restored. This feels satisfying on a deep level, reinforcing a sense of cosmic fairness. This psychological template is not unique to one blue diamond. We see it echoed in famous stories across cultures. Consider the so-called curse of King Tutankhamun's tomb. When the tomb was opened in 1922, newspapers eagerly reported a series of early deaths among the expedition members. The most famous was the sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, who died from an infected mosquito bite months after entering the burial chamber. The press declared the wrath of the pharaoh, speaking of a mummy's curse. Yet most of the team, including Howard Carter, who actually discovered the tomb, lived long, normal lives. The narrative focused on the few who died and ignored the many who thrived, crafting a story of supernatural revenge for disturbing the dead. It served the same purpose, transforming a medical coincidence into a thrilling, moralistic saga about respecting ancient secrets. These curse stories persist because they fulfill a cultural and psychological need. They make the world feel more dramatic, more intentional, and more morally structured than it often is. They give us a framework to process envy by suggesting that great fortune is dangerous, and to process tragedy by offering a reason beyond cruel chance. The Hope Diamond's curse is not a historical fact. It is a mirror reflecting our own deepest fascinations and fears about beauty, wealth, and the unpredictable nature of fate. That powerful need for a story ensured the Hope Diamond would never be confined to a museum case. It leapt from history books into the heart of popular culture, where its legend could grow in the most vivid ways. One of its earliest and most famous fictional echoes appears in Wilkie Collins's groundbreaking 1868 novel, The Moonstone. Collins's plot revolves around a large, yellow diamond stolen from a Hindu temple in India, which brings disaster and suspicion upon the English family that inherits it. The parallels are striking: a sacred Indian gem, a theft, and a trail of misfortune haunting its Western owners. While Collins never explicitly stated the hope was his inspiration, the cultural whispers of the diamond story were certainly in the air, providing a perfect template for a mystery about guilt, colonialism, and supernatural retribution. The Moonstone codified the narrative structure that the Hope Diamond's own legend would later be pressed into, proving that this particular story was one the public was already eager to believe. The 20th century, with the rise of film, gave the diamond's curse a visual language. It became a staple plot device in adventure serials and Hollywood features. In the 1934 film The Moonstone, an adaptation of Collins's novel, the gem's curse is front and center. Later, the diamond starred under its own name in movies like The Hope Diamond Mystery, a 1921 silent serial where it was the centerpiece of a dramatic theft and recovery. These stories often played fast and loose with the facts, blending the diamond's real history with pure invention, but they cemented its image in the public mind as an object of peril and desire. The narratives usually followed a familiar arc. A greedy individual acquires the stone, ignores warnings of the curse, and meets a grim, cinematic fate. Each retelling added a new layer to the myth, sometimes as a focus for a heist, other times as an active, almost sentient force of supernatural evil. This cultural permeation reached even the youngest audiences. Cartoons and children's programming have repeatedly featured cursed blue diamonds bearing a strong resemblance to the Hope. In an episode of the animated series Scooby-Doo, for instance, the gang investigates a haunted museum where a famous blue diamond is at the center of ghostly happenings. These appearances, while playful, serve a crucial function. They introduce the concept of a cursed gem to new generations, planting the seed of the legend long before a person ever steps into a history museum. The diamond's distinctive color and its association with bad luck become a shorthand, a recognizable pop culture icon. Even documentaries which aim to educate often lead with the tantalizing question of the curse, using its mystery as the hook to draw viewers into the deeper historical and scientific facts. The media, in all its forms, has been the primary engine for the curse's longevity. Think about it for a moment. How many people first learned of the Hope Diamond from a history textbook, and how many from a movie, a cartoon, or a television special about the world's greatest mysteries? For most, it is the latter. The dramatic adaptations, the sensationalized headlines, the fictionalized accounts, these are what keep the story circulating. They amplify the most thrilling parts of the legend while quietly dropping the complicating facts. A 2-hour film does not have time to explain the complex economic pressures that bankrupted the Hope family or the nuanced psychology of Evalyn McLean. It needs a clear villain, and the diamond itself perfectly fits the role. This media perpetuation creates a feedback loop. The public's fascination fuels more stories, and those stories, in turn, reinforce the public's belief. The curse survives not because of any verifiable chain of events, but because it is simply too good a story to let go. It has all the elements of a timeless tale: beauty, tragedy, irony, and a moral about the dangers of wanting too much. So, while historians and scientists work to separate the diamond from its shadow, popular culture tirelessly stitches them back together, ensuring that the Hope diamond remains forever. Two things in our imagination: a breathtaking natural wonder and a vessel for our oldest fears. But if the curse is a story, what protects the diamond from a more tangible threat? The Hope diamond now sits in one of the most secure rooms on the planet, the Harry Winston Gallery at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. The idea that it is unstealable is itself a modern myth, but one built on a staggering reality of technology and vigilance. Its display case is not merely glass, it is a cylinder of thick, bulletproof material designed to withstand direct impact. The stone itself rests on a pedestal that is wired with sensitive vibration sensors, capable of detecting the slightest unauthorized touch. The gallery is monitored by a network of cameras and motion detectors, and the entire system is linked to a central security command and the local police. This is not passive protection, it is a dynamic, intelligent shield. The diamond is no longer a portable token of personal fortune. It is a stationary national treasure, integrated into a fortress of modern engineering. This shift from a circulating object of desire to a fixed point of public heritage is the ultimate end of its journey, and it was tested in a bizarre and frightening way. In 1974, a man named John W. Hinckley SR placed a fake bomb in the Gem Hall, demanding a $200,000 ransom for the safe return of the Hope diamond. He claimed to represent a group called the Weather Underground, though this was later disputed. The threat was taken with utmost seriousness. The gallery was evacuated, bomb squads were called, and the device was carefully examined. It was, thankfully, a hoax. Hinckley was arrested a few days later, and the diamond never left its case. This incident, while resolved without physical harm, underscored a critical change. The target was not the gem's mystical power, but its immense financial and symbolic value. The thief did not seek to own the curse, he sought to exploit the legend for cash. The museum's security, not any supernatural force, was what stood in his way. Today, the Hope diamond's primary role is to be seen, not possessed. It is a destination. Millions of visitors each year press against the railing, not to steal it, but to witness its famous blue glow for themselves. They come with cameras, not crowbars. The elaborate security theater that surrounds it, the hushed gallery, the layered glass, the silent alarm serves a dual purpose. It physically protects the artifact, but it also performs the final act in the stone's long drama. It creates a ritual of viewing, a respectful distance that transforms the gem from a potential possession into a shared experience. The vibration sensors and bulletproof glass are the modern, practical equivalent of the ancient warning against touching a sacred idol. They do not speak of a curse, but of collective value. The diamond is now so heavily protected, so completely removed from the realm of private ownership, that the very premise of the curse, personal acquisition leading to personal ruin, has been rendered architecturally impossible. Its power to cause misfortune is locked away as securely as the stone itself, sealed under layers of transparent armor and silent, watchful technology. The diamond's ultimate power is not to curse but to captivate. For all the stories woven around it, the Hope Diamond's true magic lies in its physical reality, a testament to the Earth's hidden artistry. Its 45.52 carats of deep, saturated blue make it one of the most recognizable gemstones on the planet, a standard against which all other colored diamonds are measured. Its clarity is exceptional, with few internal flaws to interrupt the passage of light. But these are just the surface qualities, the final score of a symphony that began over 1 billion years ago. To understand the Hope Diamond is to understand a journey of unimaginable force. It formed at depths of at least 100 miles beneath the Earth's surface, in a region of crushing pressure and scorching heat known as the mantle. There, under conditions that would vaporize any surface material, carbon atoms were squeezed into the incredibly tight, three-dimensional structure of a diamond crystal. The presence of boron, an element carried down by ancient descending tectonic plates, infiltrated that crystal lattice and performed its alchemy, filtering out yellow light to leave only that profound blue. This stone is not a trinket, it is a time capsule. It is a physical piece of a planet's interior, a messenger from a realm we can never visit directly. Every facet reflects a history of continental collisions, volcanic fury, and slow, relentless geological uplift that finally brought it within our reach. In this light, the Hope Diamond becomes an ambassador for an entire science. At the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History, it is the star attraction in a hall dedicated to the beauty and complexity of minerals. For many visitors, it is their first, breathtaking encounter with gemology, the gateway to a deeper curiosity. They see the hope, and then they begin to notice the other crystals in the cases, the geometric perfection of a quartz cluster, the fiery sparkle of a topaz, the strange organic shapes of a malachite. The diamond becomes a starting point, a question that leads to others. How do crystals grow? Why are minerals different colors? What forces shape our planet? It transforms awe into inquiry. This is perhaps its greatest legacy, far beyond any fictionalized curse. It serves as a brilliant, compelling reminder that our world is built from wonders, that the most extraordinary stories are not always myths, but are written in stone, forged in darkness, and waiting in plain sight for us to learn their language. The diamond's current home is a stage designed for both protection and wonder. It rests in the Harry Winston Gallery, a softly lit, circular room that focuses all attention on the single, deep blue gem suspended within its massive, bulletproof case. The setting it wears is almost as famous as the stone itself, a stunning necklace of glittering white diamonds. This intricate platinum and diamond design, however, has a history of its own. It was created by Harry Winston's artisans in 1910, not for the Hope but for another large diamond. When Winston acquired the Hope, he saw the perfect marriage of metalwork and mineral. He placed the blue diamond at its center as a pendant, where it has hung ever since, the cool blue heart of a sparkling, frosty lace. This pairing is now permanent, a fusion of 20th century artistry with a billion-year-old crystal. The museum's conservators are the diamond's unseen guardians. Their primary concern is preserving that legendary color. Prolonged exposure to intense light, especially ultraviolet radiation, can theoretically cause fading or discoloration in some gemstones over centuries. To prevent this, the lighting in the case is carefully controlled. The diamond is illuminated by special low ultraviolet LED lights that showcase its brilliance without risking its hue. The ambient temperature and humidity in the gallery are constantly monitored and stabilized, creating a perfect, unchanging climate for this ancient traveler. Every few years, conservators perform a meticulous cleaning, using gentle solvents and soft tools to remove the thin layer of skin oils and dust that accumulates from the breath and proximity of millions of admirers. This is not just maintenance, it is an act of reverence, ensuring the gem speaks to future generations with the same vivid clarity, and those generations come in astonishing numbers. The Hope Diamond is without question the crown jewel of the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. It draws over 100,000 visitors each and every week, making it the single most visited object in the entire Smithsonian complex, a collection of 19 museums. Think about that for a moment. In a building filled with dinosaur skeletons, rare meteorites, and dazzling mineral halls, it is this one deep blue stone that commands the longest lines and the most audible gasps. People wait patiently for their moment at the railing, not to ponder a curse, but to witness a legend made real. They press cameras against the glass, not to capture a bad omen, but to take home a piece of undeniable beauty. This enduring public fascination is the final, definitive chapter in the diamond story. Its power was never malice, it was magnetism. It pulls us in with a promise of mystery, but holds us with the simple, breathtaking truth of its existence. That bulletproof case represents more than security. It represents a fundamental shift in the diamond story. But let's perform a thought experiment, one that pushes against the glass. Imagine, just for a moment, that tomorrow a private individual steps forward and buys the Hope diamond from the Smithsonian. It is an impossible scenario, of course. The gem is a permanent part of the national collection, but let's play it out. A modern billionaire or a global celebrity writes a check for an astronomical sum and takes the legendary blue stone home. What happens next? Would the curse, that sleeping story, suddenly wake up? If that new owner faced a business reversal, a personal scandal, or a health issue, would the headlines scream about the Hope diamond's vengeance? The answer is almost certainly yes. The narrative is too deeply embedded in our culture to stay quiet. Tabloids and social media would connect any minor setback to the gem's dark past with lightning speed. We would see side-by-side photos of Evalyn McLean and the new owner. Lists of past victims would recirculate, and the word curse would trend online. The story is pre-written, waiting for a new character to step into the lead role. Yet the reaction would also be different this time. Alongside the sensationalism, a powerful counter-narrative would emerge, one grounded in the very science we have just explored. Skeptics, historians, and scientists would flood the airwaves and articles with the facts. They would explain the boron, detail the lack of evidence for the wilder tales, and dissect the psychological patterns of confirmation bias. The conversation would become a public tug-of-war between ancient superstition and modern rationalism, played out in real time. This duality reveals something crucial about our current age. We are arguably the most scientifically literate society in history, with access to vast amounts of information at our fingertips. We can pull up the Smithsonian's research on the diamond's phosphorescence while reading a tweet about its supposed malice. We live in the tension between these two worlds. Our fascination with the curse is now a conscious choice and entertainment. We enjoy the shiver of the old story while intellectually understanding its flaws. The curse persists not because we believe it, but because we find value in the myth itself as a piece of cultural folklore, a shared ghost story about the dangers of desire. For a modern owner, the real curse might not be supernatural misfortune, but the unbearable weight of that narrative, the loss of privacy, and the relentless public expectation for tragedy to strike. Their life would become a live broadcast of a centuries-old script, where every stumble is interpreted as an act in a preordained play. The diamond's power today is not to doom, but to define, to cast anyone who holds it into a role they did not write. That modern thought experiment reveals a truth about our relationship with legendary objects. The Hope diamond story is not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a much older tradition. Across cultures and centuries, other spectacular jewels have been shadowed by eerily similar tales of misfortune. Take the Black Orlov diamond, a stunning 67-carat stone with a history as dark as its name suggests. According to its legend, this gem was once the eye of a sacred statue in a Hindu temple in Pondicherry, India. A monk, it is said, stole the diamond in the early 1800s, and a curse of suicide fell upon its subsequent owners. The story claims that a Russian princess named Nadia Vyagin Orlov and later another princess named Leonila Galitzine-Baryatinsky both leapt to their deaths from tall buildings after possessing the stone. While the historical existence of these specific princesses is debated by scholars, the narrative framework is unmistakably familiar, a sacred theft followed by a series of dramatic, fatal falls. The diamond itself, now recut and set in a modern necklace, tours museums with its chilling biography prominently displayed, a direct echo of Pierre Cartier's salesmanship with the hope. Then there is the Delhi purple sapphire, a gem with a legend so specific it borders on the theatrical. This amethyst, not actually a sapphire, was allegedly looted from the temple of Indra in Kanpur during the Indian Rebellion of 1857. The soldier who stole it, a Colonel W. Ferris, is said to have brought it back to England, where he and his family promptly fell into financial ruin and poor health. The stone later came into the possession of a writer and astronomer named Edward Heron Allen, who grew so convinced of its evil influence that he sealed it in a box with warnings and deposited it at his bank. He instructed that it not be opened until after his death. His daughter inherited the box and, disregarding the warning, donated it to the Natural History Museum in London, where it now resides. The curator who accepted it reportedly experienced a string of personal misfortunes, further fueling the tale. Notice the ingredients: a sacred origin, a theft during a violent conflict, and a chain of personal disasters that afflict anyone who dares to possess it. It is a recipe we have seen before. These parallels are not coincidental. They point to a deep-seated human impulse to narrativize loss. When a beautiful, valuable object is associated with a traumatic event like a temple robbery or a colonial plunder, its history becomes stained. Any subsequent tragedy involving an owner is not seen as random chance, but as a continuation of that original sin. The gem becomes a character in a moral fable about the consequences of sacrilege and greed. The details may vary: a leap from a building, a mysterious illness, a financial collapse, but the core plot remains constant. The object is not inert, it is an active agent of cosmic justice. This pattern tells us less about the jewels themselves and more about the stories we need to tell. In a world full of uncertainty, these curses provide a framework. They create causality. They offer a reason why a princess might take her own life, or why a family's fortune might evaporate. Reasons that are more satisfying and orderly than the chaotic realities of mental illness or economic downturn. By comparing these tales, we see the Hope Diamond's legend for what it truly is: a single, particularly famous example of a universal narrative template. We are not examining a unique supernatural event, but a recurring chapter in the long story of how humanity makes sense of beauty, guilt, and the terrifying randomness of fate. We are left with two distinct objects. One is a physical diamond, a marvel of geology with a traceable history. The other is the legend of the Hope Diamond, a cultural artifact woven from threads of tragedy and mystery. Our investigation has carefully pulled these two apart, and now we must weigh the evidence on its own terms. The stories of ruin are undeniably compelling, a cascade of misfortune that feels too patterned to be random. From the dramatic fall of French royalty to the profound personal losses of Evalyn McLean, the narrative possesses a tragic, almost Shakespearean gravity. It resonates because it speaks to a universal anxiety that great beauty and fortune must come with a hidden, terrible price. Our minds are wired to see these patterns, to connect the dots of disaster and draw a line straight through the blue gem at the center. This psychological pull is the curse's greatest strength. Yet when we demand concrete, causal evidence, the foundation cracks. We find no historical record of Tavernier's mauling, no verified suicide of Jacques Collot, no confirmed existence of Prince Kanatov. The diamond did not cause the French Revolution. It was stolen because the revolution happened. The Hope family's bankruptcy and the McLean tragedies, while heartbreaking, align with recognizable human failings and the cruel randomness of life, not supernatural vengeance. The coincidence is haunting, but coincidence it remains. Into this fertile ground of tragedy and uncertainty stepped a master storyteller, Pierre Cartier. He did not invent the whispers, but he expertly curated and weaponized them. For Cartier, the curse was not a liability, it was the ultimate sales feature. He packaged the scattered folklore into a thrilling, sensational provenance, understanding that for a certain client, danger was the most desirable accessory of all. He transformed the diamond from a mere gem into a Gothic novel you could wear around your neck. This was not history, it was marketing genius, a deliberate act of commercial myth-making that permanently branded the stone. Evalyn McLean then became the living protagonist of that myth. She bought the story Cartier sold, but she rewrote her role. Her defiance, her insistence on wearing the diamond as a good luck charm, was a public performance of immunity. She invited the narrative into her life, and when profound sorrows arrived, as they do in all lives, the story was there, ready to provide a famous, glittering reason. Her life did not prove the curse, it demonstrated how human suffering can be reinterpreted through the lens of a powerful legend, giving private pain a public, mythological shape. So what are we left with? The Hope Diamond's curse is not a single thing. It is a powerful synthesis. It is historical coincidence amplified by our innate psychological bias to find patterns. It is that pattern expertly shaped into a marketable story by commercial interests. And finally, it is that story willingly embraced and performed by its owners, creating a feedback loop that cemented the legend in our culture. The curse is not a supernatural force residing in a stone. It is a mirror. It reflects our deepest fascinations with beauty and danger, our need to find meaning in misfortune, and our timeless love for a tale that warns us some treasures are too beautiful to own. In the end, the most enduring power of the Hope Diamond lies not in any alleged malice, but in its flawless reflection of us. The journey of this single stone is a map of human history itself, from the ancient soil of Golconda to the gilded halls of Versailles, from a bankrupt aristocrat's vault to a bulletproof museum case. We have traced a path glittering with both fact and folklore, a 400-year odyssey where truth and tale are forever entwined. The documented voyage is incredible enough, a testament to trade, empire, art, and the relentless movement of beautiful objects across continents and cultures. Woven through that journey are the tragic stories, the personal ruins of the Hope family, and the profound sorrows of Evalyn McLean. Losses so deep and real they demand an explanation grand enough to match their pain. Our investigation, however, reveals a different architect for that explanation. It was not a supernatural force, but a powerful combination of human psychology, clever marketing, and the relentless human need for narrative. The scientific analysis gives us a diamond with boron in its heart and a red glow in the dark, a natural wonder whose true magic is geological. The historical scrutiny shows a trail of coincidences retrospectively linked, of misfortunes that have human causes far more complex than a gem's malice. Pierre Cartier sold a story, and we have been buying it ever because it speaks to something fundamental within us. We are captivated by the paradox of beauty and doom because it feels true to life. It echoes our own secret fears that great fortune is precarious, that desire has a cost, and that the world maintains a kind of moral balance where taking something too beautiful requires a payment in kind. The Hope Diamond's curse endures not as history, but as mythology, a dark fairy tale we keep alive because it helps us make sense of the terrifying randomness of fate. It allows us to believe that tragedy has a reason, even if that reason is a stolen, glittering stone. So now the question turns to you. Having walked this path from mine to museum, through the labs and the archives, where do you stand? Do you see a cursed object, its legacy written in too much sorrow to be mere chance? or do you see a breathtaking natural specimen around which we have woven a story to explain our own world? The diamond itself sits silent, holding its blue light and its red secret, leaving the final judgment to us, the storytellers. Share your verdict in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into the shadows of history, subscribe for more investigations into the world's greatest mysteries.